Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling something that I think everyone can relate to, the language of our everyday lives.
Yeah.
And we've got this really cool guide that we're going to be looking at today called
Right.
English for Daily Activities, Vocabulary and Sentences.
Cool.
And I'm really excited to break it down with you all.
Yeah.
Maybe you're someone who's prepping for a trip or just loves picking up new phrases in English.
Okay.
But whatever your reason, I think you'll be surprised by how much we can learn about ourselves and the world around us just by looking at these simple everyday words.
It's true. We often overlook the richness of everyday language, but it really is fascinating.
Yeah.
How much it reflects our habits and our cultures and even our psychology.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's dive right in.
Okay.
The guide starts with our morning routine, and it uses some vivid verbs to kind of paint a picture, like wake up, get out of bed, shower. It's like a mini movie playing in your head,
Yeah.
You instantly picture someone going through these very motions.
And it's interesting how these words act as markers of time. Wake up. That's the shift from sleep to awareness.
Right.
Get out of bed.
Right.
That's the start of physical action.
Yeah.
And shower represents a moment of cleansing and preparation.
It's true.
These very simple verbs structure our whole day.
Yeah, it's like the foundation,
Right.
And then the guide even includes some sample dialogue.
Oh, cool.
Like simple questions like, what time do you wake up? I mean, it seems basic, but imagine asking that question like when you're traveling.
Right.
Instantly, you are learning about someone's routine and maybe even their culture a little bit.
Exactly. Sharing those routines can help us connect and find common ground.
Yeah.
But it also, I think, opens the door to understanding cultural differences.
Oh, absolutely.
For example, in some cultures, people wake up before dawn to meditate or exercise.
Wow.
While in other cultures, it's totally normal to sleep in later and, have a more leisurely breakfast.
Right.
So the language that we use to describe our mornings reflects all those cultural nuances.
I'm curious, what time do you usually wake up? Early bird or night owl?
I tend to be more of an early bird. I find that I'm most productive in the morning. So
Okay.
I like to get a head start on my day. But I can totally appreciate the appeal of a slower, more relaxed morning routine as well.
For sure. For sure. There's a line in this section I have to share because it made me laugh.
Okay.
It says, I always forget to pack my lunch.
Yeah.
I mean, who hasn't been there, right?
That's a great example of how language connects us through those shared experiences,
Totally.
even the slightly frustrating ones.
Hmm.
But it also, I think, highlights this concept of perspective memory,
Perspective memory.
which is remembering to do something in the future.
Okay.
And that's actually a pretty complex cognitive process.
So you're telling me packing a lunch isn't just about throwing some snacks in a bag. It's a mental feat.
It is.
Does the guide offer any tips for us to improve that perspective memory?
It does. It suggests using visual cues, like leaving a note on the door or setting an alarm on your phone.
Okay.
These external reminders can be super helpful in jogging our memory
Gotcha.
and making sure that we don't forget those important tasks.
Okay. Note to self. Use more visual cues.
All right, so after that morning rush, we hit another universal experience, the commute.
Yeah.
And I don't care if you're in New York City or a small village, that journey from home to work or school is something we all share.
Absolutely. And the words we use to describe our commute often say a lot about our lifestyle
Okay.
and even our socioeconomic status.
Interesting.
So, for instance, someone who drives a luxury car probably has a very different experience than someone who takes a crowded bus.
Right.
And, these simple verbs really paint a picture of our daily reality.
It's true. And the guide talks about all these different modes of transportation, driving, taking the bus, walking, even cycling.
Right.
I mean, imagine you're telling someone you cycle to work. They instantly know you're probably...
Pretty active and environmentally conscious.
Absolutely. And think about the cultural differences, too.
Oh, yeah.
In some cities, cycling is just the norm.
Right.
But in others, it's seen as more of a recreational activity.
Yeah,
So our language reflects these cultural attitudes.
it does. Okay, so we've woken up, we've gotten ready, we've battled the commute,
Yep.
and now we arrive at work or school ready to tackle the day.
All right.
What are some of the key words and phrases that pop up in this section of the guide?
Well, we definitely see a shift towards more task-oriented language.
Okay.
Words like meeting, project, deadline, presentation. These words kind of evoke a sense of purpose and productivity. reflecting the demands of a typical workday.
I'm curious, looking at all these work-related words, how do they make you feel? Excited, stressed, a little overwhelmed?
I think it really depends on the individual and their relationship to their work.
Yeah.
For some people, these words might trigger feelings of anxiety or pressure, while for others, they might represent accomplishment or purpose.
Right.
So it's interesting how the same words can have such different emotional responses.
Absolutely. Now, the guide also mentions the word study,
Right.
reminding us that for a lot of people, the daily routine involves hitting the books rather than the boardroom.
Yeah.
And there's a fascinating contrast between those two words, right?
Hmm.
Work implies tangible output. Study suggests more internal process of like absorbing knowledge.
Yeah, you hit on a really interesting point there. The language we use reflects those different goals and orientations.
It does.
So in the workplace, we're often focused on those concrete results and deliverables,
Right.
whereas in academia, the emphasis is on intellectual growth and understanding.
It's like those two little words, work and study, open up this whole world of differences
Exactly.
in how we approach our daily activities. But
Yeah.
whether we're focused on projects or papers, eventually that clock strikes quitting time and we get to shift gears to the evening.
The evening. Time for relaxation and recharging after a long day.
Yes.
The guide highlights words like cook, eat, relax, and spend time with loved ones. You know, these words evoke a sense of warmth and comfort.
They do.
It's a shift from that more structured language of the workday.
It is. And it's interesting how the guide emphasizes that social aspect of evenings, too. Phrases like have dinner with family or chat with friends.
Yeah.
You know, it highlights the importance of connection and community, especially after a day of like individual pursuits.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about those cultural variations we were talking about earlier.
Oh, yeah.
In some cultures, evening meals are these elaborate affairs.
Wow.
You know, multiple courses.
Yeah.
But in others, it's much more common to have a quicker, more informal dinner.
Right.
And the language we use reflects those cultural norms and preferences.
Speaking of cultural differences, I'm curious, what's a typical evening routine like in your household?
Oh, for me, evenings are all about winding down and disconnecting from the day. I love to cook a simple, healthy meal.
Nice.
Maybe read a book or listen to music.
That sounds nice.
And just spend some quality time with my family.
Awesome.
It's my way of creating a sense of peace and balance after a busy day.
I love that. Picking up some relaxation tips from you.
Good.
But before we get too cozy, let's not forget about those 2 glorious days.
Oh, yeah?
That break up the work week. Weekend.
Yes, the weekend. Time for freedom, leisure, and pursuing our passions.
Yes.
It's a stark contrast to the structured routine of the weekdays, and the language reflects that shift.
The guide uses phrases like hang out, go shopping, go to the park, watch a movie.
Yeah.
These words just evoke a sense of spontaneity and choice, a departure from that more task-oriented language of our work lives.
And notice how those phrases often imply a social dimension, too.
Oh, that's interesting.
Weekends are a time for connecting with friends and family.
Right.
You know, whether it's hanging out at a cafe or going to a concert together.
I love that weekends as a time for connection, both with others and with ourselves.
Exactly.
But you know, it's interesting to think about how this very concept of a weekend is a relatively modern invention.
That's true.
For most of human history, people didn't have this designated time for leisure and recreation.
You're absolutely right. The idea of a weekend really emerged with the rise of industrialization and the need for a regular break from the demands of factory work.
Oh.
It's a fascinating example of how those societal changes shape our language and our perception of time.
It really is. And speaking of societal changes, I think we're ready for a little break ourselves.
Okay.
We'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive into the fascinating world of everyday English.
That's good.
Don't go anywhere. We're back, and, you know, as we're going through this guide, it's amazing how even simple words about our daily routines can reveal so much about our personalities and cultures. It's like each word is a little puzzle piece, and as we put them together, we get this fascinating picture of human life.
It's true, and one thing that stands out to me is how much the guide emphasizes the power of language to connect us.
Oh, yeah.
Even in those like most mundane activities.
That's a good point. It's not just about conveying information, right? It's about sharing experiences and building relationships.
Yeah.
And I really like how the guide uses these little snippets of dialogue to kind of illustrate that point.
Like the example in the getting ready section.
Okay.
Where two people are talking about putting on makeup in the morning.
Right.
It's such a simple exchange, but it creates this sense of connection and shared experience.
I think what I find interesting is that even if you don't wear makeup yourself, you can still relate to that conversation.
Totally.
It's about these little rituals we all have, these things that we do to prepare for the day ahead.
Yeah. And sharing those rituals through language can be a way of finding common ground, even with people who are very different from us. It reminds us that we all have these basic human needs and desires, no matter what our background or culture is.
That's true. Speaking of culture, are there any other examples from the guide that illustrate how language reflects cultural differences?
Well, we talked about the variations in morning routines earlier,
Right.
but think about something like meal times.
Okay.
In some cultures, dinner is a highly social event.
Okay.
You have multiple generations gathering around the table for a long, leisurely meal.
Wow.
The guide uses phrases like share stories and enjoy each other's company to describe this type of dinner experience.
It sounds so heartwarming.
It does.
Like the meal itself becomes a symbol of family and community.
Exactly. But in other cultures, dinner might be a more private affair.
Okay.
A time to just unwind and refuel after a long day.
Right.
The guide uses phrases like eat quickly and catch up on the news.
Interesting.
Describe that type of dinner routine.
It's fascinating how something as simple as dinner can have these totally different cultural connotations.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what is our listeners' dinner routine like? Do you gather with family and friends, or is it a more solo affair?
Yeah. And what words would you use to describe your typical dinner experience?
It's funny, I never really thought about how much my vocabulary changes.
Yeah.
Depending on who I'm having dinner with.
Right. It's a reminder that language is constantly adapting to our social context.
Yeah.
We use different words and phrases depending on who we're talking to and what we're trying to communicate.
And sometimes just paying attention to those subtle shifts in language can reveal a lot about our relationships and social dynamics.
For sure. Going back to the guide's structure for a moment, I think it's fascinating how it implicitly highlights the cyclical nature of time.
Oh, interesting.
We go through this daily routine of waking up, working, or studying, relaxing and sleeping, and then we just do it all over again the next day.
We're caught in this loop.
Yeah. But language gives us a way to mark the passage of time.
Okay.
And find meaning within that cycle. And within that larger cycle, each day, we have these smaller cycles as well.
Right.
We eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Exactly.
We go to work or school and then come home. We engage in focused activity and then seek relaxation.
Yeah, the language we use helps us navigate these microcycles and create a sense of order within our day.
It's like each word is a little timestamp, marking a particular moment in our routine.
And those timestamps can be incredibly powerful.
Okay.
Think about how a simple phrase like, it's lunchtime, can instantly change your mood or your energy level.
It's true.
It signals a break from work or study.
Right.
A time to refuel and socialize.
Or how about time for bed?
Oh, yeah.
It's a signal to wind down, relax, and prepare for sleep.
Exactly. Just hearing those words can trigger this sense of calm.
Yeah.
And anticipation for the rest that's ahead.
It is amazing how these simple phrases can have such a profound impact on our physical and emotional state.
Right. They're not just words. They're cues that help us regulate our daily rhythm.
Up until now, we've been focusing on these more practical aspects of our daily routines. The actions we take, the words we use to describe them.
Yeah.
But what about the emotional landscape of our day? I feel like that's a really important piece of the puzzle that we haven't really fully explored yet.
I completely agree. Our daily routines are not just a series of tasks.
Right.
They're filled with emotions.
Yeah.
From the excitement of starting a new project to the frustration of dealing with a traffic jam.
Totally. And I think the guide subtly hints at these emotions through its vocabulary choices. For example, the word commute often carries the sense of drudgery or stress. I mean, who really enjoys being stuck in rush hour traffic?
No one.
Right. And then conversely, a phrase like hang out evokes feelings of relaxation and camaraderie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even just the simple act of describing our day can reveal these subtle emotional undertones.
It's like we're using language to paint a picture, not just of what we do, but how we feel about what we do.
Exactly. And that's a powerful reminder that even in our most routine activities, there's this underlying emotional current that shapes our experience.
This is making me think that I want to pay more attention to the language I use, not just for accuracy, but for emotional expression.
Yeah.
Like instead of saying, I have to go to work, maybe I'll say, I'm looking forward to tackling that new project today.
That's a great example.
Right.
By choosing words that reflect those positive intentions, you can actually shift your mindset and create a more enjoyable experience.
And that's what I love about language. It's not just a tool for communication.
Right.
It's a tool for shaping our reality.
Yeah.
We can use it to create positive self-talk, to express our emotions more authentically, and to build stronger connections with others.
I think that's a really wonderful insight.
Yeah.
By being more mindful of the words that we choose,
Right.
we can not only communicate more effectively, but we can also connect more deeply with others and with ourselves.
So as we continue exploring this guide,
Okay.
let's keep this emotional dimension in mind.
Yes.
It's not just about the actions that we take, but the feelings those actions evoke.
Absolutely. Because ultimately, language is a tool for expressing the fullness of our human experience, you know, and all of its complexity and nuance.
And speaking of complexity, I'm really intrigued by that section on weekend activities.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it's this fertile ground for exploring this interplay between language, leisure, and personal identity.
I agree. The weekend is often seen as a time for self-discovery.
Right.
And for pursuing our passions. And the language that we use to describe those activities can reveal a lot about who we are and what we value.
Yeah, it's like our weekend vocabulary becomes this reflection of our true selves.
Right.
Unburdened by the demands of work or school.
Exactly. And I think our listeners are going to discover that their weekends are so much more than just a break from the routine. They're a reflection of who they are and what they value most.
I'm excited to delve into those weekend vibes and see what other linguistic treasures we uncover.
Yeah.
But first, let's take a quick moment to hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back. We're back and ready to unpack those weekend vibes.
Okay.
It's like stepping into a different world, isn't it?
It is.
The pace slows down, the pressure eases up,
Yeah.
and we finally have time to breathe and just be ourselves.
You know, it's fascinating how even this concept of a weekend is a relatively recent invention.
That's true. For most of human history, you know,
Right.
the rhythm of life was dictated by those natural cycles.
Yeah.
Sunrise, sunset, the changing seasons.
Absolutely.
So when did this idea of a designated weekend kind of emerge?
It really started gaining traction in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
Okay.
You know, with the rise of industrialization and labor movements, as work became more structured and demanding.
Right.
People really started to recognize the need for a regular break.
Gotcha.
A time to rest and recharge.
So the weekend was born out of necessity,
Yeah,
a way to balance the demands of modern life.
exactly.
It's amazing how these societal changes shape
Yeah.
not only our routines, but like our very perception of time.
Absolutely. And with the advent of the weekend came a whole new set of vocabulary and activities,
Right.
all associated with leisure and personal fulfillment.
Which brings us back to our guide.
Okay.
And its fascinating section on weekend activities.
Yes.
It's like this linguistic snapshot of how we've come to define this time of freedom and self-expression.
Yeah, I love how the guide uses that phrase, hang out.
Uh-huh.
It's so casual and effortless.
It is.
It perfectly captures that sense of unstructured time.
Yeah.
You know, just being present in the moment
Right.
with people you care about.
The guide also mentions phrases like sleep in, catch up with friends, explore a new hobby, or go on an adventure.
Yeah, these words and phrases evoke such a sense of possibility and excitement. You know, a chance to break free from the routine
Right.
and embrace those new experiences.
And it's so interesting to contrast these weekend phrases
Yeah.
with that more goal-oriented language that we use to describe our weekdays. It's like a linguistic shift from productivity to pleasure,
Exactly.
from obligation to choice.
And, you know, the guide even highlights some cultural differences
Oh, yeah.
in how people spend their weekends. For example, in some cultures, weekends are primarily for family time,
Okay.
with big gatherings and traditional meals.
Right.
But in others, it's more common to spend weekends with friends,
Okay.
pursuing individual interests or exploring new hobbies.
And even within those broader cultural patterns,
Right.
there's so much room for individual variation.
Yeah, some people might go hiking or play sports,
Uh-huh.
while others might prefer to read a book or, you know, binge watch their favorite show.
Right.
The language we use reflects all these personal preferences and passions.
So, listener, as we wrap up this deep dive, we have a question for you.
What does your weekend vocabulary say about you?
Right. What activities fill those precious days of freedom? And what words and phrases capture the essence of your weekend experience?
Think about it. Do you crave adventure and excitement? Or do you seek peace and relaxation?
Yeah.
Are your weekends filled with social gatherings or solitary pursuits?
You know, the language you use to describe your weekend can reveal so much about your personality and values.
This deep dive has been such a fascinating exploration
Yes.
of how language shapes our understanding of daily life.
It's been great.
We've uncovered hidden meanings in these simple words we use every day.
Right.
We've explored cultural differences. We've even delved into the emotional landscape of our routines.
And it's amazing how much we can learn about ourselves and the world around us just by paying attention to the words that we use every single day.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
So we encourage you to continue exploring the language of your daily life.
Pay attention to the words you use, the emotions they evoke, and the connections that they create.
And remember, every word that you speak is a chance to express yourself, to connect with others, to shape your own unique experience of the world.
Beautifully said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of everyday English.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
Until next time, keep those linguistic wheels turning.